There was a time when using Linux was a badge of honor, but it was a painful badge. It was an era where installing an operating system meant compiling your own kernel. It meant editing text files just to get your mouse to move. It meant that if you wanted to connect to the internet, you needed a PhD in computer science. In the early 2000s, Linux was powerful, but it wasn't friendly. It was built by wizards for wizards. The idea that a grandma, a student, or a creative artist could use Linux as their daily driver was laughable. And then, practically overnight, that changed. A new player entered the arena. It didn't just want to be another distribution. It wanted to be Linux for human beings. It was an operating system funded by a dot-com billionaire who had just returned from space. It disrupted the industry by shipping millions of free CDs to every corner of the globe. It dared to file a bug report against Microsoft Windows itself. This is the story of Ubuntu, how a project born in a London apartment became the face of desktop Linux, flew too close to the sun with its ambitions, and eventually found its true calling running the entire modern cloud. This is the untold story of the Orange Giant. To understand Ubuntu, you have to understand Mark Shuttleworth. In 2002, Mark Shuttleworth became the second space tourist in history. He spent $20 million of his own money to spend 8 days on the International Space Station. But where did that money come from? Shuttleworth was a South African entrepreneur who founded Thought, a certificate authority for internet security. In 1999, right before the dot-com bubble burst, he sold it to VeriSign for $575 million. He was young, incredibly wealthy, and looking for a purpose. After seeing the Earth from space, he returned with a desire to create something that bridged the digital divide. He was also a huge fan of Debian. Debian is the grandfather of community Linux. It is robust, free, and democratic. But in 2004, Debian was slow. Releases happened when they were ready, which could take years. The software was often outdated by the time it launched. Shuttleworth had an idea. What if you took the rock-solid foundation of Debian, but applied a strict schedule? What if you polished the rough edges? In April 2004, Mark gathered a dozen of the best Debian developers in his London apartment. He made them an offer. He would pay them to work on a new project full-time. They didn't have a name. They called themselves the No Name Yet team. Their goal was audacious. Build a version of Debian that was easy to install, released every 6 months, and fit on a single CD. Mark chose the name Ubuntu. It's a Ngoni Bantu term, meaning humanity towards others, or often translated as, I am what I am because of who we all are. It was a statement of intent. This wasn't just code, it was a community. On October 20th, 2004, the first version launched, Ubuntu 4.10, codenamed Warty Warthog. The Warty name was a joke. They expected it to be rough around the edges. But compared to everything else, it was a revelation. It detected your hardware automatically. It booted into a graphical desktop. It didn't ask you 50 questions about your monitor's refresh rate. But the real revolution wasn't the code, it was the distribution. In 2004, broadband internet was rare in many parts of the world. Downloading a 700 megabyte ISO file took days. So Mark Shuttleworth did something insane. He launched ShipIt. You went to a website, typed in your address, and a few weeks later a package arrived from the UK. Inside were legitimate pressed Ubuntu installation CDs, professional stickers, and it was completely free. No shipping cost, no handling fee. Canonical, the company Mark formed to back Ubuntu, spent millions on postage. Critics called it burning money, but Mark saw it as marketing. Suddenly, Ubuntu was everywhere. It was in schools in Kenya. It was in internet cafes in Brazil. It was on the desks of broke college students in Ohio. This single move destroyed the barrier to entry. Ubuntu became the default Linux because it was the only Linux you could physically get your hands on. With popularity came confidence. On the very first day Ubuntu's bug tracker went live, Mark Shuttleworth filed bug number 1. The text read, "Microsoft has a majority market share. This is a bug which Ubuntu is designed to fix." It sounds arrogant now, but in 2006, Microsoft stumbled. They released Windows Vista, and it was not great. It was slow and bloated. Ubuntu seized the moment. They introduced Compiz. If you were a tech YouTuber in 2007, you made a video about Compiz. You could spin your desktop like a 3D cube. Windows wobbled like jelly. It made Windows Vista look boring and static. For a brief, shining moment, Linux was cooler than Windows. Manufacturers like Dell started selling laptops with Ubuntu pre-installed. The year of the Linux desktop seemed finally possible. But to beat Microsoft, Shuttleworth believed Ubuntu needed to evolve. It needed to stop looking like a collection of open-source parts and start looking like a polished product. And that is where the trouble began. In 2010, the tech world changed again. The iPad launched. The future was touch. Canonical decided that the traditional desktop was dead. They announced Unity, a new interface designed to work on desktops, tablets, and phones. The community hated it. They moved the window buttons to the left side like macOS. They removed the taskbar. They forced a workflow that frustrated power users. But the biggest sin wasn't the design, it was the privacy. In Ubuntu 12.10, Canonical integrated Amazon search results directly into the desktop menu. You searched for a file on your computer, and Ubuntu sent that search term to Amazon to show you products. The spyware accusations flew. Richard Stallman, the father of the free software movement, famously called Ubuntu spyware. Ubuntu had broken the sacred trust of the Linux user. The user base fractured. People fled to Linux Mint, which kept the old, familiar layout. Ubuntu was no longer the friendly community project. It was starting to look like Big Brother. Mark doubled down. He poured millions into convergence, the idea that your phone could plug into a monitor and become your PC. They launched a crowdfunding campaign for the Ubuntu Edge phone. They asked for $32 million. They failed. The phone never happened. The tablet never happened. For 5 years, Canonical burned cash chasing a consumer dream that never materialized. In April 2017, Mark Shuttleworth made the hardest decision of his life. He pulled the plug. He announced that Unity was dead, the phone was dead, convergence was dead. Ubuntu would return to the standard GNOME desktop. They laid off nearly half of their staff. To the outside world, it looked like a failure. It looked like Ubuntu had lost bug number 1. Microsoft still owned the desktop. But while everyone was watching the desktop war, Ubuntu had quietly won a different war, a much bigger one: the cloud. When companies like Netflix, Uber, and Instagram spin up servers, they don't use Windows. They don't use Red Hat. The vast majority use Ubuntu. Remember how easy Ubuntu was to install in 2004? That same ease of use made it the favorite for developers building the cloud. It was free, it was stable, and it had every library you needed. Ubuntu became the standard operating system for the internet. And it didn't stop there. When the AI revolution hit, Ubuntu was ready. If you are coding in Python using TensorFlow or PyTorch, you are almost certainly doing some of it on Ubuntu. And in a twist of irony, even Microsoft surrendered. Microsoft realized they couldn't beat the Linux developer ecosystem, so they integrated it. With the Windows subsystem for Linux, Microsoft partnered with Canonical to bring Ubuntu inside Windows. Mark Shuttleworth didn't kill Windows. He made Ubuntu so essential that Windows had to absorb it to survive. Today, Ubuntu is a boring operating system, and that is the highest compliment you can give it. It is no longer the radical disruptor sending free CDs to the jungle. It is the corporate standard. It is the plumbing of the digital world. It bridged the gap. It took Linux from the basement of the wizard's tower and put it into the hands of millions. It forced the entire industry to care about user experience. Mark Shuttleworth didn't get his Star Trek future where everyone uses an Ubuntu phone, but he achieved something perhaps more lasting. He proved that open source could be human. Thanks for watching.